What if a doctor's manual could decide your entire future, all based on a single tiny spot on your skin? Well, that's exactly what we're diving into today. We're unlocking the ancient diagnostic code of Leviticus chapter 13. We're going to walk through this verse by verse, following the path of a priest who had to be a physician, to understand this world of intense observation, quarantine, and life-altering judgment.
All right, let's get into it. Here's our roadmap for today. We'll start where it all begins, that first tense examination. Then we'll see what happens during quarantine, look at some of the more advanced and special cases, and really feel the weight of that final verdict, not just for people, but for their belongings too.
And so it begins. You have to imagine a person's entire life hangs in the balance in this first moment. The priest has to be a medical examiner and a detective, and his only tools are his eyes and a very precise set of rules.
So verse 1 kicks things off, establishing this as a divine law from God to Moses and Aaron. But verse 2, that's where the human drama really starts. Picture this. A man, his heart absolutely pounding in his chest, walks up to the priest. He nervously shows him the one thing he can't stop thinking about: a swelling, a weird scab, or a bright spot on his skin. This isn't just a rash, you see. It's a potential life sentence. The diagnostic process has officially begun.
Right away, we come to a critical fork in the road. In verse 3, you've got the signs for an immediate diagnosis of unclean. If the hair in the sore is turned white and the sore itself looks sunken in, deeper than the skin around it, that's it. Judgment is swift. But then there's verse 4. This is where there's a glimmer of hope. If the spot is white, but it's not deep, and the hair still looks normal, the verdict is delayed. It's time for quarantine. Now we move into the next phase for these unclear cases. And this isn't about guesswork at all. It's a very methodical process of waiting and watching. You can just imagine the anxiety for the person at the center of it all.
Verses 5 and 6 detail this agonizing wait. So verse 5, the person is shut away for 7 days. On that 7th day, the priest comes back. Has the sore spread? Has it faded? If it looks exactly the same, well, it's not over yet. They're isolated for another 7 days. Then, finally, verse 6 brings the final examination. If the sore has faded and hasn't spread, the priest can finally say the words they've been desperate to hear. Clean. It was just a scab. They wash their clothes, and they can go home.
But wait, there's a terrifying catch. Verse 7 reveals that even after you're declared clean, it's not necessarily over. If that simple little scab starts to spread across the skin, you're brought right back to the priest. And verse 8, it delivers the devastating reversal. If the priest confirms it's spreading, the diagnosis flips to unclean. That hope they had is just completely shattered. So what happens when the signs aren't so simple? The code now gets even more specific, diving into chronic conditions and other more unusual situations, and each one has its own precise rulebook.
Verse 9 introduces us to a chronic case. And in verses 10 and 11, the priest's examination reveals 3 really key signs: a white swelling, white hair inside it, and, this is the clincher, raw, living flesh in the sore. The text calls this old leprosy. There's no waiting period, no quarantine needed. The diagnosis is immediate, and it's final: unclean.
Now, this is where things get really fascinating. It's a total paradox. In verses 12 and 13, if the disease breaks out and covers the entire body, turning the skin completely white from head to toe, the person is actually declared clean. It's almost as if the disease has run its course and burned itself out. But as verses 14 and 15 show, that clean status is incredibly fragile. The second any raw flesh appears, bam, they're instantly unclean again. And verses 16 and 17 show the cycle can even reverse again. It's a constantly shifting state of being.
You know, this diagnostic code even accounts for old injuries. Verse 18 introduces a sore that pops up in the scar of an old healed boil. Verses 19 through 23 then apply the exact same logic we've already learned. Is it deep? Is the hair white? Is it spreading? If you're not sure, quarantine. Then, from verse 24 to 28, the manual repeats the entire process almost word for word, but this time for a sore that appears in a burn scar. The principle is crystal clear. It doesn't matter where it came from, only what the signs are now.
Okay, now we move to sores on the head or the beard. In verses 29 and 30, the key sign actually changes. We're not looking for white hair anymore, but for thin, sickly yellow hair in a deep sore. Verses 31 through 37 then walk us through that familiar quarantine protocol, but with a really interesting detail in verse 33. The person has to shave around the sore to make it way easier to see if it's spreading. After the observation period, the final verdict is given. What's really interesting is how careful the text is to distinguish disease from just normal stuff.
Verses 38 and 39 make it clear that simple, dull white spots are harmless. The person is clean. And in the same way, verses 40 and 41 say that natural baldness, also clean. But verses 42 through 44 give us serious warning. If a reddish-white sore appears on that bald head, the person is immediately declared unclean. It's all about context.
So this is the crucial part. This is what it all leads to. After all the examinations, the quarantines, the agonizing waiting, the priest has to deliver a verdict. And that verdict will redefine a person's entire existence.
This is the question that's been hanging over this whole process, right? What does this diagnosis actually mean for that person's life? Verse 45 gives us the devastating answer. The person themselves has to become a living, breathing warning sign to everyone else. They are commanded to cry out, "Unclean, unclean," to anyone who might even think of approaching them. Verse 45 lays out the gut-wrenching reality of this diagnosis. Torn clothes, an uncovered head, a covered face, they essentially become a walking symbol of their condition. And then verse 46 delivers the final crushing blow. They must live alone outside the camp, completely cut off from their family, their friends, their entire community. And the concern over this contamination was so profound that it didn't even stop with people. It extended to their possessions. This same diagnostic process was also applied to their clothing and leather goods.
Verses 47 through 49 describe this greenish or reddish plague that could show up on fabric or leather. It was seen as this deep contamination that absolutely required the priest's intervention. Just imagine a sickly green or red discoloration spreading through the fibers of a cloak, a clear visual sign of a persistent, serious problem.
The protocol for garments, you'll notice, mirrors the one for people. It's so logical. In verse 50, the item is put in isolation for 7 days. Verses 51 and 52, if the plague spreads, it's considered active and malignant, and the whole thing has to be burned. If it hasn't spread, verse 54 says you wash it and isolate it for another week. Then, verse 55, if the color is still there, you burn it. Verse 56 says if it is faded, you can just tear out that piece. And finally, verses 57 and 58 state that if the plague ever comes back, the whole garment is burned. Only after a second washing can it finally be declared clean. And now we reach the conclusion. The text wraps it all up, summarizing the entire purpose of this incredibly detailed 59-verse chapter.
Verse 59 brings it all home. The whole point of this entire intricate chapter, all these detailed rules for skin, for hair, for fabric, it all leads to a single binary judgment. Clean or unclean. In this system, there was simply no middle ground.
So what do we take away from all this? Well, this was never just about medicine, was it? It was about community, it was about identity, and it was about the sacred. It really forces us to ask, why was this sharp separation between clean and unclean so fundamentally important to them? And what does it reveal about the deep and sometimes painful connections between our physical bodies and our place in the world?